that. So there you go. We're now recording. So yes, so welcome everybody to How to Win at Social Media and Still Have Time for Everything Else. Please do put any questions that you might have in the chat as we go along. We've got enough time probably to stop for some of those questions, but we're also going to have a Q&A at the end. We've allocated about 15 minutes for that. We've allocated about 45 minutes for this part of the webinar as well. There'll also be some follow-up at the end in terms of further action that you can take to implement the things that we're going to talk about today. So, Jamie, could you take us to the next slide, please?
Certainly. And just to mention, Richard, is and to everyone that take notes as you go along, but we will as well give you a copy and a PDF of the slides as well. So you know, if you've got a knife and fork there, if you're eating your lunch there and you can't write, you'll get a copy there of those as well. And of course, we've said it's being recorded. And if you keep yourselves on mute as well, and then we can use the chat for any questions and for any things that we play along with during the session. Over to you to introduce yourself, Richard.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes, this is going to become a bit Matt Hancock at times because I'm going to be saying next slide, please, Jamie.
Yeah.
But anyway, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Dawson. I'm a digital marketing coach, and I help businesses, ambitious businesses, achieve best practice in their digital marketing so that they can grow their business in the right way. I've got 22 years of experience helping business owners and their teams stay ahead of the curve in digital marketing. I'm a judge at various digital marketing awards. This year I've been doing, so I've just finished actually reviewing all the entries for the Northern Digital Awards. Actually had a final judging session yesterday, shortlist to be announced next week. So yeah, and I like to think I bring my clients results, accountability, motivation, confidence. With me, they get a strategy, a structure, and a plan. And I help business owners and their teams develop a sales pipeline, a marketing funnel, so they can acquire more of the right type of customers and clients. So I'm going to put some links in the chat shortly. Please connect with me using those links. I'd love you to book a one-to-one with me. I'd love you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and my email list. And I'll hand you over to Jamie to introduce himself.
Super. Yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Jamie Squires, and I'm a productivity trainer, speaker, and coach, also known as Human Dynamo. And what is Human Dynamo? Well, the concept is we want to get stuff done, we want to get our work done, but with less stress. And so it's about getting things done, but feeling good as well, and being productive and having a better relationship with our work and our technology. And it means we can have a life outside of our work as well. You can find out more about me at jamiesquires.co.uk, and you'll find out a little bit more about what I do and how my thinking during this webinar. And you can also find some fun educational videos on Instagram at Human Dynamo Guy as well.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Just posting my links in the chat there. Right, okay, let's just talk a little bit about the structure of this little webinar that we put together. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to run a poll in a minute, a little bit about the time that we really have, the time we're actually spending. Then I'm going to cover a little bit about the best times to post on social media. Jamie's going to talk about the best times for you, which is not necessarily the same time as the best times for the channels themselves. I'm then going to talk about the why, which is very important. The why we're doing this, you know, what's the purpose behind this activity? Jamie's then going to take us through designing some good habits. I'm then going to talk about some quick ways to create content. And then Jamie will talk about the benefits of unplugging, which is very important, of course. And at the end, we'll just give you a quick summary. There's some further resources, as we already talked about. We'll tell you more in detail about those at the end, and that will help you follow up on the things that we cover in this webinar. So I think it's next slide, please, Jamie.
Super. So hopefully that set the scene, you know, a little bit about us. But of course, you know, this session is about you guys. So I want to get you involved here. We're going to launch a poll. If Richard could launch this poll with a question of, Yeah, how much time a week do you spend researching and creating for posts and interacting on social media? Is it 0 to 1 hours, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, 10 plus? You're probably having to have a bit of a think about this because it's not something we always log here. So if you could let us know, and of course all these are anonymous as well. If you let us know, and we'll end the poll shortly.
Oh, nearly.
Okay.
Nearly got votes
wonderful.
in from everybody. Nearly.
Yeah, you'll have a bit of a think. It's one of those
So I'll end it now for Jamie.
Yeah,
super.
I
think we've got votes in from everybody.
We're there.
Yeah. Okay. So
thank you everyone for sharing.
So I'm going to share the results now, guys, so you can have a look. Hopefully you can see that.
Okay, so we've got nearly half of you there, 5 to 7 hours a week. 22% was sort of 3 to 5. So you're kind of maybe about half a day a week there, maybe, and well, the 5 to 7 hours, we might be looking about an equivalent of a day a week. Got 1 to 3 and 0 to 1. So a real mix there of the amount of time that we spend. Some of us might be maybe not spending as much time as we'd like. Some of us might be spending maybe too much time, and other things are getting neglected. So can you let us know in the chat, what time challenges around this are you currently experiencing? Is it it's difficult with your other work and other things you've got to do and other things in life that you end up spending maybe too much time on it, or too much time on particular activities with regard to social media? It'd be great to know any of the struggles that you're having. And Jill straight in there, great. I interact but spend a lot of time I've got to put my teeth in for this one, prevaricating about what to post myself, and often don't post at all. I understand you. Yeah, and we'll be looking at some things around that, of kind of thinking of how we can suddenly, because it's hard to then suddenly magic some idea like that when we want to post. Al said, yeah, motivating myself to do it. Yeah, that's really difficult. It's one of those things where you think, oh goodness, there's so much I've got to think about and do, that we end up get paralysis by analysis, and we don't end up doing anything. So thanks for sharing. Michelle says, the demands of the algorithm to keep people on site responding and commenting on other people's posts. Yeah, we'll look at that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
the machine wants us to work in a particular way, and it might not be great for us. So super. And Pam has said she outsources the majority. It's I don't have much time, and particularly and not particularly creative. I do try to respond though, so you're doing some responding, but you outsource some of that. That's great. And Sarah, not being able to schedule PDFs, videos, polls on LinkedIn. I use Canva for the, yeah, big fan. We've done this in Canva. So having to pop on all the time and engaging all the time. Yeah, there's sometimes we can end up checking and just getting involved throughout the day. And it can take our focus away from other things. Super. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. That gives us a nice feel for where some of you come from, some of the struggles and where you're at. Okay, let's get rid of the poll. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, it's some very interesting feedback there from everybody, and no doubt you'll tell us at the end of whether we've addressed some of those issues. I hope we do. I hope we do anyway. Right. Yeah. So let's talk about best times to post on social media. What I've got here is data for 4 social media channels. There are others, of course, as we all know. This is quite a good way of looking at it. These are heat maps that that's produced by a company called Sprout Social. If you haven't heard of them, they're a social media software scheduling company. They produce these stats on a regular basis. These are a couple of months old, I think, and they show you on a global basis what the engagement is at different times of the day and different days of the week for most of the major platforms. I've chosen 4, but they have got them for the others as well. So the first thing to say, first caveat to enter here, is this is global data. So it's all parts of the world, all parts of, and all time zones, all demographics. So it is a bit global. I think that's the I think that's the problem. And you've got to keep that in mind in terms of your own audience. So your own audience may be slightly different to these norms, to this general data. And it's also always worth experimenting in terms of when you want to post on social media. It may be different to these peak times. The other caveat I would give you is that don't forget, of course, that the times where the heat map shows the lighter colors might be times when there's less competition for your content. There is still a decent audience there, but it's a less crowded space for you to post. So there's another reason why you might actually be counterintuitively, you might avoid the hotspots and you might go for the cooler periods. So those are important caveats to bear in mind. However, these heat maps give you a guide to when things are really happening on each of the platforms that we're going to cover. Oh, sorry, can you go back a step there? Thank you. Back a slide, thank you. So Facebook, let me just quickly cover that. As you can see there in this latest heat map, weirdly, there's a big heat map at 3 o'clock in the morning on 5 days a week, which I find hard to believe, but apparently that's what the stats say. But more generally, which probably will fit in with other people's perception, is that it's probably 6 or 7 in the morning till about lunchtime. Interestingly enough, days of the week, or there is a bit of activity on weekends, that probably fits in with a lot of what you might know of your friends and family who use Facebook. Some of it might surprise you. Obviously, let us know if you think that's a bit surprising. So that's Facebook. Next slide, please, Jamie. Okay, well, Instagram, it's sister platform to Facebook. Interesting one, Instagram. Slightly different, as you can see. A little bit later in the morning into lunchtime, just after. A little bit more activity on the weekend, especially around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays and Sundays. So interesting to see that, a little bit different, possibly reflects a different demographic, because don't forget, Facebook is generally an older demographic. Instagram is slightly younger, although less than it used to be. So that might be a reflection. It might be that a younger demographic on Instagram get up later. I don't know, possibly. So next slide, please, Jamie. Right, okay, yes, so this is TikTok. I've chosen the 4 biggest platforms, by the way. Now, TikTok, as those of you who've already tried it will know, is growing incredibly quickly. Interestingly, there you see the hotspot is a little bit later in the day. It's more late morning, early afternoon, and it's very focused on that center of the week, isn't it? There's less activity than you perhaps expect on the weekend there. I mean, there is quite a bit. I mean, this is relative, isn't it? We've got to understand that TikTok is, like the other platforms, so enormous that even a cool spot there is pretty busy. But yeah, interesting to see that it's a little bit later in the day there. Again, it might be a reflection of the demographic, probably again a younger user base than we saw with Instagram, and probably younger again, and a couple of steps younger again than you generally get on Facebook, and that might be the reason. Final slide on this one, Jamie, please. Okay, and finally on LinkedIn, perhaps unsurprisingly, because it's a business platform, very much focused on the working week. In particular, hotspots are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, in between, roughly speaking, the hours of about 7 or 8 when people are logging on for work, till about just after lunchtime. But you can see there's a fairly good spread of reasonable intensity all the way through the working day, really, and the working week. That is not to say, though, that there isn't some activity on the weekend. There is. Those of you who post on LinkedIn or engage on LinkedIn in the weekends will know there is quite a bit there. And I'll come back to my earlier point that I made, which is that just because it's not a hotspot doesn't mean to say it might not be a good time for your content. So I think it's over to you next, Jamie, isn't it?
Well, thanks, Richard. Yeah, that's good. It gives us a good indication of kind of those heat maps, certainly around sort of the middle of the day, early, some and some a bit later. I'm thinking with TikTok, it might be the kids are all coming out of school at 3 o'clock, getting their phones and doing those TikTok dances. I don't know, maybe at 3. But of course, that is when other people like to interact, and also the you know, and if the algorithm kind of says, you know, it's better, LinkedIn kind of start hinting, or the other social media apps start hinting at particular times, everyone starts following at particular times, so it can maybe gravitate towards those particular times. But I like to be a little bit more in control of these things. And I've got a great quote here by the great Quincy Jones. Let me know in the chat if you know any classic albums or musicians that he has produced, Quincy Jones. But he said to his son when he was at the mixing desk producing, when his son was learning, he says, don't let the machine work you, you work the machine. So I like to think of that with regard to social media and thinking about, let's not play to, you know, I always think of it's like the Wizard of Oz, where, you know, the wizard is pulling all the strings and then we're just kind of playing along to his beat. That, you know, we've got to really work out what works for us as well. We could look at those stats, but we really got to look
हाँ
about what
ठीक ही
works
मिल
for
जाते
us.
हैं वहाँ पे
So,
sorry, we had a.
are we okay? You're right, muting there.
Yeah.
Super. And so I've kind of split the idea of thinking about our day and when we're doing activities into kind of 4 modes. And so we've got creative mode, interactive mode, and research mode with regard to our social media activities. And then we've got our other work mode, because as you guys have said, you know, you're not in and doing this stuff all day, every day. It's not your main job. And even if you're a marketeer, it might not be, your social media might not be the whole part of the day. So we start thinking about when is best for us. You know, maybe certainly our mental energy, we could start thinking about what would work best, rather than, and also it stops the overwhelm of thinking of all the things that we've got to do. I think it was, who had mentioned about lots, you know, suddenly not doing anything because there was a lot, lots of things to kind of think about, that we could split into these 3 modes. So creative mode is that one where we're writing maybe, or producing videos or content, where we've got a lot of thinking to do. It's where we're trying to really use the cognitive brain, and we need some quiet time and some real thinking. For me, when I'm doing that, I do it first thing in the morning. The mornings are better for me. I've got more energy. I like to, what we call, eat the frog, get that thing done first, the hard work of maybe writing or creating something or producing a video, get it done first. I feel satisfied afterwards that it's done. And so that concentrated focus work, I would think about planning early on. But that's for me. For you, it may be elsewhere in the day. Then you've got the interactive mode. That's where, you know, we might have posted and then we're kind of just commenting on other people's comments and reacting to those. Generally, we don't really have to be thinking about that all of the time in that mode. But if we have notifications on all the time, we're kind of constantly in that interaction, and it can end up distracting us from other things that we're doing, creating, researching, our other main work that we're still involved in it. So we could maybe compress that into just a particular time of the day that we go in interactive mode, and then we go into the app and then we come out again. So we keep notifications disabled. Then research mode as well. Of course, we need to think about, we don't suddenly have ideas that just pop out of our heads. So doing some research, maybe having a look around on social media and thinking and finding ideas, reading books, articles, websites, etc. But maybe planning in time for that separately as well. So we could think about splitting these modes up. And then we think about other work mode as well. So when we're in doing our other work mode, we're not getting distracted by the other social media bits, especially kind of the interaction part. So here's an example of that might be, it's not always typical for me, but you know, creative mode first thing, maybe 9 till 10 o'clock out here I've got in the calendar. Then I'll go into my other day-to-day work, 10 till 1. Then maybe at 1 o'clock I might have a sandwich and open up my apps and do some responding. I might even post at that time. I often post around lunchtime myself, thinking about those heat maps and around, because I mainly post on LinkedIn and Instagram. So around that kind of lunchtime, I might post and then interact for an hour or so while I'm having my lunch. And then research, you know, when we're doing research for things, we can go down rabbit holes and we see shiny stuff on the internet when we're doing that. Is I leave that till towards the end of the day, because one is, again, it's not big thinking work like the creative work. We're just gathering ideas and thoughts and seeing what might be useful. By doing it at the end of the day, usually I have a stop point. I like a shutdown complete, ideally by 5:30 or 6 o'clock, that I'm done, or I've got other activities to do. So then I'm forced to get out of those rabbit holes that I'm going down on the internet to then go into my non-work activities.
Yeah, that's interesting, that, Jamie, because I'm probably the opposite way around, actually. I found my best creative time for me is the end of the is the latter part of the day. And I always used to think it was the beginning of the day, but it took me about 20 years to work out that it's the end of the day that I get my best ideas. And probably the research bit is at the beginning. So it is very different for different people, isn't it? That's the thing.
Exactly, yeah. And and we'll talk later about experiments of testing these things out.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Okay, great. So let's talk about the why, because that really is very important, as Simon Sinek says, to start with the why. What is your why? Why are we doing this? And that's part of the motivation aspect here. So you wouldn't really be doing these things if there wasn't a good reason to do it. And that applies to all aspects of using your time, that using your time in a productive way. So why are we posting on social media or writing things for our website? Well, firstly, perhaps overlooked by a lot of people, I find, is we're engaging with our existing customers. It's really quite an important part of posting, is that your existing customers and clients, and maybe recent customers and clients, they like to see you posting on social media because it kind of just gives them a sense of reassurance. It tells them what you're up to, keeps them engaged and informed. And it's often an overlooked aspect, I think, of posting on social media. Secondly, you're engaging with your wider community, maybe the business community that you're in, maybe the wider community itself of the public in your area, if you're that type of business. So engaging with the community is an important reason. Thirdly, very important, of course, and a lot of what motivates a lot of people is engaging with prospects and gaining sales from it. And absolutely, that's a very important part of social media. But it's only one of the main four. There are other reasons as well. And fourthly, finally, of these four, whys, there's building brand awareness. So there are a lot of businesses out there that just purely post for brand awareness. That's the only reason that they do it. That's purely the reason they do it. So we're going to perhaps show an example of that in a moment. So this first example here I've got of a why is engaging with your community. On LinkedIn, those of you a lot of you who use LinkedIn will be familiar with the LinkedIn poll. Somewhat overused in many cases, but it can be quite a good way of engaging with the wider business community. I've given an example here, just screenshotted an example which was a very successful one, where we got 20,000 votes because he's asked a fairly generic question. But it is nevertheless a great way of engaging with the wider business community. On Facebook, for example, you could use there is a poll feature inside groups that you can use. That's quite a good way of doing that. You can run a poll. Also, another good way on Facebook you could do maybe with your Facebook page can be to run quizzes. People love quizzes. That's a great way of engaging with your community as well. So that's a community engagement example. Next one is a customer engagement example. I've chosen a very big brand, Coca-Cola, arguably one of the, if you're not the biggest in the world, certainly one of the top 4 or 5. That's a great example from Twitter, as you can see in that case, of how to engage with your customers. That really is very, very clever indeed, getting people to tag another contact, probably a friends and family, and growing the engagement. So that's a nice simple example of customer engagement. You could do something similar. You have to be a little bit careful with some social media platforms because they don't like clickbait and engagement bait. So you've got to be a little bit careful, but that's a good example. Next one, Jamie. Final example is brand awareness. Now, that is a little bit more subtle than most. Do you see? It's not that subtle because most of you have worked out who that is. But that purely is being posted for brand awareness. And quite a lot of their budget will probably be focused on just brand awareness rather than prospecting for sales and customers, rather than engaging with the business community and their customers. So those are sort of a quick run through of some of the examples. And I think I'm handing you over to Jamie now for who's going to tell you about designing good habits. Jamie.
Thanks, Richard. And yeah, just looking back on the chat there, saying about the quotes, and thanks, Sanjay, for Back on the Block from Quincy Jones. I don't know that one. The most familiar ones for me with Quincy Jones is the Michael Jackson albums. He produced Thriller and Bad there. But yeah, other quotes here is great for thinking about habit formation, designing good habits around this. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld had a classic quote of "Don't break the chain," and his idea is when he writes one joke a day, and he would have on his wall like these wall calendars for the month where you've got all the empty blocks there for each day, and every day when he's done the joke, he put a cross in the block to say it's done, and he doesn't allow himself to miss a day, and he doesn't miss a day of the crossing. He don't break the chain. That's his habit formation idea. And then if we start at the bottom here, and it's about little and often there with regard to social media if we can. I think it was Al earlier saying motivating ourselves to do it is just a little bit. And that's why I split the idea into creative mode, interactive, and research. It's just do a little bit of those at a time, and you start building up some momentum in each of them. And so ideally with habits, we want to be doing them daily if we can, but of course with our work it doesn't always fit, and some of you guys have said you do quite a number of hours a week with your social media activities, so it might be that you do them all on a Wednesday because of your other work fits like that. So it might be a weekly routine you might have to think about, rather than like I had on the slide earlier about maybe planning and pre-committing to time for the day of doing these little bits. Is that you might have to have more of a weekly routine. But what I like to see is the big idea of it is 30-day experiments. So if you're going to say, right, I'm going to post every day, or I'm going to write something every day, I'm going to just spend half an hour every day interacting, whatever those things are, don't say, oh, this is kind of forever, and then be disappointed if it doesn't work. It's just run it as a 30-day experiment, because it gives it enough time to get some data there over 30 days to see if it's working. And then at the end of 30 days, you can ask yourself kind of the 3 questions of what went well, what didn't so much, and am I going to carry on with this, or am I going to adapt it as you go? So I always like that in any habit formation, is because normally when it is, like if I say, all right, I'm going to try being vegetarian or vegan, and I'm like, oh goodness, this is a bit overwhelming, I'm not sure, maybe I'll start after Christmas or something. I'll say, well, just try it for a week, or try it for 30 days. And that way it calms my brain down to say, it's just an experiment, let's see how it goes, and we can adjust along the way. And the final idea is using a timer as well, because being in that creative mode, and like Al says, motivating yourself to do something, is you can get yourself a timer and just set it for, say, half an hour or an hour, and say, right, I'm just going to write or create something in this time. So it motivates you to start by starting the clock, but also that you can create yourself a reward for when the timer beeps at the end, that you've finished, maybe finish that creative work. But also, if you're interacting as well or researching, and we can go down rabbit holes or spend too long on the internet, the timer reminds us to abort, because we might want to go and do some other modes of working, like especially our other modes of work as well. One big idea, and I teach a lot around this, is the Pomodoro technique, which Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. And great quote from Star Wars there, your focus determines your reality. So yeah, if your focus is fragmented through the day, doing lots of different things and getting interrupted by social media and trying to do your other work, that is going to be your reality. If you focus on particular modes at particular time, that is your reality, and it's hopefully going to be better focus and better quality work as well, and you're going to feel better for it. The Pomodoro technique, in a nutshell, is really working in 25-minute sprints with our work and 5-minute rests there to give our brain a rest from focus work. But the idea is you set the timer for 25 minutes, and you kind of tricking your brain thinking 25 minutes, that's not very long, but you'll be surprised how much you can do in 25 minutes when you focus. So again, that's something you can just test out. You don't have to buy a fancy timer. I have a fancy one here that I use and I put a timer in for the clock here so we don't run over. Got the timer going, but you can just use the timer on your phone, and there are apps that you can use around that as well. And I'll put some resources in when we send some stuff through to you afterwards. Richard.
Thank you, Jamie. Right, okay, so I feel the need for speed, as they said in Top Gun. So here's some ideas to help you to speed up the content creation process. Hopefully give you a few shortcuts, some easy ideas, easy wins. So starting at the top there, selfie or a picture with a paragraph of content is often really quite easy when you're out and about, say, doing something, to take a quick selfie and a little description of what you're up to. So it's kind of, how is your day going? Behind the scenes, even, that kind of thing. That's a relatively quick win, easy type of content. You could just shoot a short video on your phone of you talking to camera. Again, you might be updating people on what you're up to, what's going on in the business, maybe a success story, that kind of thing. Keep it really short and easy, something you don't have to edit. Repurposing your existing content, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, but that's really a great way to save time. You could create a content series, and a content series is where, for example, you do a weekly update on a particular topic or a particular format of post. So you might do a content series over several weeks about a particular topic, broken down into 4, 5, 6, 7 stages. And that's quite that also helps you break up a topic into smaller bits, makes it easier for you to create that content, and easier for you to find the time to do it as well. I've mentioned there, the other thing I've mentioned there is copy your competitors. Well, obviously I don't mean literally copy your competitors, but so don't use the same pictures and branding and logos. But obviously your competitors will come up with some quite good ideas, and you think, I could do something quite similar to that. And as long as you don't make it too obvious, and you do it the day after or something like that, and it's blooming obvious what you've done, you can actually get some great ideas from competitors, not just direct competitors, people in similar businesses to yours as well, are also useful. The other thing we're going to talk about in a moment as well is having a content pot, which is a very useful tool for helping you create content in a quick way. Jamie, do you want to go to the next slide? Right, so let's just talk a little bit more detail quickly about repurposing your existing content. So repurposing is taking something you've already created, like, let's say, a blog post, and turning it into something else. So you might take the content of a blog post and put it in as the content of your email newsletter. You might similarly, take that content and turn the main points in that blog post into an infographic using something like Canva. And infographics are a very easy way to disseminate the information that you want to get across. You might, you've written a blog post, you might turn that into an ebook or a PDF guide that people can download on LinkedIn. Similarly, you could take blog post content and turn it into a vlog, into video content. You could turn that as a script for a video. Or equally, you could maybe do it for a podcast as well. So there are lots and lots of different things you can do to repurpose content and to make that journey a bit easier. When you repurpose it, mainly what you're doing is you're changing the format. The actual content itself isn't changing dramatically, but putting out a blog post, for example, today, and in a couple of weeks' time, that turns into, let's say, your email newsletter. And that's a great way of keeping that flow of content going. Jamie, put the next slide up. Thank you. So the other idea I wanted to just touch upon here is the content pot. Now, all a content pot is somewhere that you, is a repository for all of your ideas that you have as you go along. So it might be that your thing is to make notes in a notebook, a good old-fashioned notebook that you carry around with you. Alternatively, most of us will have an app on our smartphone that we record notes on our smartphone, even voice notes, for example, but physically tapping in some thoughts that you've had. Do that as you just go along. Others will use apps like OneNote, which is the thing in the middle there is OneNote. That's a Microsoft application that also can share with other people as well. So that could be a quite useful way of recording information and sharing it with other people. But it's just really a repository of information. And when you do allocate the time to do some creativity and creating some social media posts, you're going back to your notes, to your content pots to actually sort of find that really. So that's really that's a really good way of gathering all that information and putting it into a format that you can use effectively. Thanks, Jamie.
That's great, Richard. And I'm just thinking about, with my own work that I repurpose a lot, and I learned a lot from yourself with regard to I'll shoot a video on something, and then that idea I might think about how can I use that within my newsletter as well, and I might tie them all in the same sort of week or month, those similar themes there, and then maybe just do little twists on them as I go. So yeah, with the newsletter or just a LinkedIn post or an Instagram video, and kind of mix things up a little bit. And the idea of the content pot, I've always been a big fan of the content pot, because you want to, you get all these great ideas and things, and then you can just pile them in there and then go delving in the bucket when you do need inspiration of something to post. You can then go and explore maybe some of the stuff you've already done. And those content pots could be maybe going back over through, say, LinkedIn or Instagram, and you're going through some of your old posts. You could think, oh yeah, I could use that. Or if you've got just in some sort of notes format, some raw notes, you could go and pull those and kind of cut and paste, and then maybe draft and get things formalized. So I use something called Roam Research to kind of pile all my notes in there, and it's got something called bi-directional links in, where I look at topics like inbox zero and getting things done and time blocking and breathing and all these things. So I've got them all as kind of, I can search for all of those things and quotes I've had from people and websites that I can easily then access there. And I'll put a link into, I mean, these are paid things. There's one called Notion as well that's pretty good, and this Evernote. They're all getting pretty clever. Most of them are paid. You can just simply use a Word document, or if you've got Office 365 and you pay for that, use OneNote. It's pretty powerful. Some of you, I love still piling things into my iPhone notes as well. But so some of us are just pen and paper. We might just want to just sketch down some ideas and thoughts and keep them in an ideas book if we're more pen and paper. So finally, looking at the benefits of unplugging. What do I mean by unplugging? Well, if any of you saw the film The Matrix, which I think is about 25 years old now, it says, I was thinking about The Matrix with regard to this, and then I realized it's the idea of the famous quote from it was, you take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. So it was about taking either the red pill or the blue pill of either being in the Matrix in kind of this virtual reality, or the other pill where it's actual reality, and realizing that we're all, people are all actually plugged into the Matrix. And so the way I see it is that, yeah, screens are great, and being on social media is great, and I work and we do so much time on our screens that we need to think about, well, what are the benefits if we're maybe not on the screen all of the time? And we do start hearing, obviously, a lot about this, and anyone who's got kids and trying to get them off a device is fun and games. But if you think about and let me know in the chat, where do you get your best ideas for things? What are you doing, or where are you at the time when you get your best ideas?
Yeah,
for me,
it's not on screen for me, Jamie. It's in the shower, unfortunately. I've got nowhere to write the damn thing down.
Yeah. Please share. There, Jill, out running. Yeah, you're not on your screen. You're doing some kind of physical activity there. That's great. Any others?
Ooh.
Yeah, answers when you're not actively thinking about it. Yeah, and it's part of what's in our brains. Neuroscientists found in the 90s called the DMN, or the default mode network. And that's the bit of our brain that kicks in when we're not focusing. And that's where kind of ideas that might have been two separate things, we haven't seen connections, and boom, they join together. And we have those aha moments, or we suddenly remember that we didn't get the shopping in, or so we'd forgotten something as well. So yeah, making space there for doing little or doing other activities away from the screen, sometimes when we can get our ideas, and that's where the content part is great, or we can suddenly just capture things there and then maybe flesh them out when we're back at our screens. Also unplugging from social media, and so we can get the higher value stuff done, mainly our other work there as well, because we may not see the social media part as a massive part of our work, but we realize it might be taking a large chunk of time. So, if we then put those restrictions on to ourselves of how long we're spending on it and committing to that, it means we've got space for that higher value stuff might not be work. It might be stuff outside of work as well. And then connecting to real people. We've seen this with the pandemic, how we've missed connection. And I was on a webinar recently where the research has shown that people, the reason why people want to go back to work, because from the pandemic, everyone's used to working at home, was not really about collaboration. It was about connection. That came out the top answer that people is that physical, face-to-face connection. You've also got what I call smelling the bread, or some call smelling the roses, is that we've got other senses as well. With the screens, it might be just our eyes, maybe our ears. We've got to think, and like Jill says, she goes out running, that we kind of, other hobbies and activities and things that we kind of see the world around us, and not just social media and the screen isn't the only thing. Of course, we've got to think about better sleep as well, and apologies to anyone who's got young kids or suffers from insomnia, but yeah, a lot of the stats are showing that we should really be getting about 7 to 9 hours sleep a night ideally. I'll put a link to a great book called by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. And and what happens usually at night, we're on our phones, maybe still doing email and social media till late. There's a lot of stimulation going on. It messes up our melatonin as well. Of course, we've got things like on the iPhone, like night shift mode, things like that. So we don't get as much of that blue light issue, which then our brains are thinking when we're seeing the screen, it thinks, oh, our brain thinks, oh, it's daylight, it's daytime. And so it becomes very active. And so it helps, we have difficulty then getting to sleep. So yeah, we need to think about that unplugging. A lot of the research is saying, an hour or maybe a couple of hours before we go to sleep is stepping away from the screens. Over to you, Richard, for the summary.
Yes, so I hope what you found today really useful and enlightening, and it's going to help you. So the key now is to how do you make these things happen? I mean, it's great to come to a webinar and gets lots of useful information, lots of useful thinking, but the important thing is to make it actually, to implement it, make it actually happen. So here's some things that Jamie and I put together to help that process. Firstly, you should have the links in the chat for, at least for my email list. I think Jamie may put his in, or is going to put his in shortly. If you make sure you're on our email list, you'll get an email from us, with a copy of this presentation as a PDF. We'll also include in our email useful links and information from both of us and follow up to the topics that we've talked about. And also, finally, in terms of follow-up, if you haven't already had a chat with us, book a free 30-minute chat with me using the booking link that I put in the chat, or you can email Jamie using his email address there. He'll probably put that in the chat as well. And that you can have a further chat about how you can implement these things. And so in summary, that's really where we are now. Hopefully, I think you found that useful. What we're going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording in a moment. We're going to hang around for about 10-15 minutes for anyone who wants to ask any questions in our Q&A session, and see where we go from there. So thanks everybody for listening to that, and any further questions, you've got some great comments already in the chat, but please fire away.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Richard. And yeah, just